Hello, back again to S&OP Vendor Day live from the Netherlands. Welcome here in the audience in Utrecht, and welcome online. So, well, it's a hybrid event. So we have here an audience of about 100 people, and online 200 to 300, depending when they're logging in. But the new thing is with hybrid, in a digital event, you start at 11 sharp, and now it's 11:05. So that's a hybrid world. So we are also adjusting to the new world that we're not strictly on time in a hybrid world anymore. Then again, we go on. We continue with our program. Next, we have a great case study. We have a case study from the Henkel and Laundry and Home Care Department division. Ariane Longpré, she is responsible for integrated business planning within Henkel Laundry and Home Care. And before that, she also worked for the adhesives division. So she will be not live here on stage. She is working now out of Düsseldorf. Hybrid traveling is still a bit of a nuisance. But then again, she is live. So I hope we will see you there. So I see you here. So Ariane, I would say the floor is yours, and good luck. Take care.
Thanks, Martin, and good morning to everyone. I hope you can hear me well in the room.
Yes, we can.
Yes, excellent, very good. Okay, so good morning. My name is Ariane Longpré. I'm Director Planning and the IBP Program Lead for Laundry and Home Care. So first of all, Martijn and the team, thank you. Thanks for having me joining this event. I would have loved to be here, to be there with you in Utrecht, but life gets its own way somehow, and so personal circumstances did not allow for me to be with you today. So yes, we revert to a virtual setting. Maybe that balances a little bit more also the different channels that we have live as part of this event. So for those of you online, we share a common reality today. And the good news is that we should have plenty of practice also, thanks for the pandemic for the past year or so. So with that, let me enter the core of the presentation. And I'd like to start off by saying a few words as to who we are. So it's with pride that I introduce you to Henkel. Some of you know the companies, others a little bit less so. So I think that feels right as an entry point just to position this. So this company, this family is, I've been part of it for the past 17 years. Also Henkel celebrated last month, actually, its 145th anniversary and really going strong still, active in 78 countries, counting 53,000 employees and generating sales in the magnitude of 19.3 billion euros. So you can see Henkel has 3 different business units, as Martijn said in the introduction. I've worked for many years in adhesive technologies. And let me use this also, maybe this slide to introduce myself to the audience. So I worked for most of my career in adhesive technologies. You see this on the left-hand side. Hopefully you'll also recognize some of our brands there. So I have been 12 years in supply chain management, so really leading operative supply chain team, both on the local and on the regional level. Leading teams for demand, supply planning, but also service strategy, which is really about understanding our operating model, looking into how we segment our customers and product portfolio to make sure that we have we deliver consistent service and customer experience. Not only I led operative supply chain teams, but also many change initiatives. So I was privileged and entrusted to build from scratch a supply chain organization in Eastern Europe, really taking care of organization, ERP and system landscape, and of course overlaying to this the whole process aspect as well. More recently, I did something completely different. So actually, I joined marketing and strategy, leading the market strategy and organizational excellence team for the Adhesive Technologies BU. And a lot of what I've been working on is go-to-market model, market segmentation, and really understand and derive from that, how do we want to organize ourselves as an organization in terms of roles, in terms of sizing, in terms of operating model. So we don't, once we understand where we want to play, then we are very consistent also as to how we organization on how to win in this marketplace. Right. So having positioned this a little bit, having worked in supply chain marketing and strategy, I think you'll understand why I didn't hesitate when I was presented with the opportunities to join a different BU and to lead an IBP program. So I decided to join and to jump into that opportunity, and that was back in May of this year. So still pretty fresh, and for sure a big change, because that's a different part of the organization. It almost feels like working in a brand new company. And this is really what the change that I've made recently. So moving on now into, or let's say zooming into laundry and home care as a business unit, I'd like to provide you a little bit of some facts and figures so that we can get a feel of what we try and apply IBP to. So you can see, I mean, you see different brands. It's a well-diverse business. We have strong local brands, but also global ones. I mean, you can see Persil as an example. And it's a business that grew both organically and inorganically. And that's something that I will come back in the presentation, because that shapes a lot the way we think about our supply chain and our various processes. Now, I'm at home in a supply chain organization, so let me place that also here for you. So in a supply chain organization for this BU, we have 7,000 plus employees. We have 33 factories, 47 distribution centers, and of course, many more contract manufacturers that we also need to integrate as part of our overall supply chain. We constantly, like many of you do for your respective company, work on our network, be it production or even warehousing. And this is really what we try to do in a very dynamic fashion. So we have mostly a local for local supply chain setup, a lot of make to stock products, as you can imagine, being a CPG, FMCG business. But more and more, and I think that's also a change that we see and that we try to drive, is that we are shifting operations to more regionalized setup to drive key innovations to the market, right? So we are more and more regionalizing and concentrating these innovations that are more also probably capital intensive into regionalized or even globalized manufacturing center. And that's a change that we operate, and that also call up for a different degree of visibility, ability also to aggregate data. And you will see this also reflected in the way we think about our S&OP process. So with that, I would like to move to, let's say, to our S&OP assessment, which is essentially take you all the way back to our point of departure, and so where we stand, and thinking of that a little bit, narrating this along a timeline. So I think once I placed Henkel in RBUs, I would like also to talk about the point of departure, and then I decided to draw a line in the sand in 2014. And 2014 coincidentally corresponds also to the time where Henkel set up a global supply chain organization. So really consolidate the, if you will, the governance and strategic layer of the supply chain organization for the 3 BUs, and centralize this in Amsterdam. And we also consolidated our purchasing function there. And so we decided, to a certain degree, even if the BUs enjoy a very high degree of autonomy for their respective markets, we decided to start finding synergies and give ourselves common framework. S&OP was one of the very first process we set our eyes on to be able to do that. So you can see on the left-hand side, we kicked off our S&OP with selected pilot countries, right? And that took us already from 2014 to 2016 to go from these, let's say, pockets of activities in the pilot countries into really completing a global rollout. So actually, respect for the time involved, and you will see this also along the presentation. And Johan was referring to 10 years even doing this at Heineken. So I think that it's something that we need to take very humbly, but also take the time to drive that transformation. So from 2016, what we then did is to move and elevate the discussion, not only at the level of the local P&L, because once again, we have a very local business model in that part of the organization. But this is when we made the first attempt at having regional consolidation. So looking at this through the geographic lens, but also do, let's say, an aggregation at the category level if we look into the ways we segment our market and portfolio. In 2018, we already launched our first maturity assessment. So looking back on what we've done and trying to take the pulse as to where we stand into our various markets, and we did this in the form of a self-assessment. And that was also the time where we decided to install a coach community so that people from get away or move away from their respective countries only to see what's happening left and right, and have those best practices also flowing a bit more freely in the organization. And in 2019, of course, then again, in the spirit of continuous improvement, we looked into the templates, the digital templates that we have built. And that was also the first attempt that we made at driving executive review. Okay, so I think that's a good narrative just to place yourself in the timeline. And this is something that I will also now build on. But at this point in time, what I can say is that we have an S&OP process that has developed positively, that has gained in maturity, and we have really that continuous improvement notion ingrained into the way we think about it. But of course, there's still a lot more to do. Now, and then came 2020. I think 2020 hardly needs any introduction, or what happened. I think we all know now. It's almost history. And as many of you, we faced several internal, external challenges, right? And that started already before COVID, but it got accelerated and intensified and greatly, right? 2020, if you remember at glance the financials that I showed a few slides ago, was a good year for laundry and home care, right? Because many of us felt the need to stockpile, right? Good or bad, that was, I think, a natural reaction to the disruptions we were seeing in our daily lives. But also there was an increased demand for home hygiene products, which we benefited from. So we started at that stage from positive a position of strength in terms of how healthy our P&L was, but still we felt a lot of pressure already. So and I'm not going to go exhaustively to what you see on the slide here, but let me just name a few examples of where we felt that pressure and where we felt that discomfort or almost pain, right? So the first one, we realized that our portfolio grew in complexity through all the acquisitions that we've conducted over time. We also felt the promotion pressure. This we always did, but the pressure on margin, that's unique to many, that's common to many of you. But we really started to see a squeeze on margins, of course, in the second half of last year, and major pressure also this year. And we also realized that we need to make some significant changes in terms of system landscape, capabilities, be it from a platform perspective and from a people perspective, right? Because that really is becoming crucial to be able to keep up with the pace of change. So it's pretty clear that what got us there will not be sufficient to face what comes ahead. And if we cannot control these external factors, certainly what we can do is to choose how we organize our response to this. And so we saw our S&OP process as a major lever to organize this response, right? That's something that we felt we can build on, but we need to also take to the next level. And so we decided to proceed to a holistic review and baselining as far as this is concerned. So like anything else, you start by, okay, what is it that I've got? And again, we have a very local business model. So we had to grow and draw an inventory almost of all the different practices, material that we have on every country. And we went ahead and did that. We also realized a benchmarking analysis, and you can see here the framework from Gartner, nothing unusual. That's something that we have used and leveraged so that we can not only measure and benchmark ourselves to peers, but also to look into our internal best practices. At that point also, we said, hang on, this is not a supply chain topic, that is a business topic. And so we also took the leap to interview several stakeholders in the organization, and we did that across 12 selected markets. So we wanted this to be representative of different market dynamics, of different also market presence and footprint of Henkel in the countries and in the regions. And so we engaged with general managers, with supply chain, with sales, and also with a business controlling community, just to once again take a pulse check as to what we're at. And with that, we collected that. Of course, we consolidated this, and we put that picture back in front of people to just say, okay, does that reflect what we're at? Do we have an agreement as to what is our current point? Because only then we can be clear as to why we see a need also for change, right? And now what I will do is to spend a little bit of time also on how we drove those different steps. So for us, it was important to bring an outside perspective on that. So we chose to bring a consultancy who could offer some perspective, but also some benchmark to help assess the process. And if you look at that matrix and the different dimensions of it, we also use this from the very beginning to inform the decision on what would be good markets to run that assessment with. It was important to us to take this both from a qualitative and from a quantitative perspective, right? And I think that that framework that you see here on the screen it was quite useful for us. We felt that those dimensions were not only meaningful to tell us what we're at today, but also it's a valid framework to forge a view on the to-be process, right? Because it's important that we are able to paint a picture as to where we want to be. And with this, we realized we made some progress, for sure. I mean, you saw the way that we already went through, but there's also a gap being formed between us and industry leaders. And we do have some strong best practices internally, but we also realized that we have a wide range of performance amongst the various countries that we cover as a business. So with that, a little bit of diagnostic, right? So what did we realize? So number one, we have a lot of room for improvement, which translate into opportunities, right? If we think positively about this, and we really do. So the first one is we realize that Henkel, what we call an S&OP process, is actually more of an S&OE. If you think of what granularity of conversation we have, the frequency at which we have those touch points, whom we engage, and what's most importantly, what's the time horizon that we try to project decisions on. It's very much in the short term and in the now, right? No right or wrong, but I think that's part of the realization that we've made as a first step, right? So, and even by having that, we realized that we could do a better job even at connecting with operations, for instance, as far as scheduling is concerned. The second realization and opportunity is that the link that we have, so the link between S&OP and P&L steering is often not there, or it's quite loose. And that's something that we also need to strengthen, right? So that connection between an S&OP process and the finance is not there. So we still live a little bit in parallel universe almost. S&OP is also mainly volume driven, right? Which is also an indicator of that connection with finance. And of course, because of the time horizon that we cover, we were not connecting with the strategy itself. And finally, maybe the last layer is that it's very much locally focused, which is fine. It's a factor of our business model and of organizational blueprint as well. But at some point, you need to also enable, once again, aggregation so that you can make decisions on a different level. And that came very strongly as part of that assessment that we've made. Still, we do have some best practices, and that's something that we try to enact, and that's something that we try to diffuse in the meantime, where we have countries really having S&OP as a backbone to how they run their business, that cross-functional nature of running the process is very present. And we do have also practices where we integrate volume and value, but it's painful because it's still very much done in Excel. But to credit to people, we try hard in the organization at present to make it work. And so that picture, as I said before, we put it in front of people and different business leaders in the organization. You see what we have on the left-hand side. This is really an outcome of some of the workshops that we had. And the good news is that people agree with the assessment and people see also the need for change. So there's really a high interest within the organization to contribute and to shape those next steps, right? And you can see some of the quotes on the right-hand side. I'm not going to go through them, but I think it's already depicting a good realization that we made as an organization, because people realize it's not about just system or making technological advance. It's a lot about culture, how we work, how we collaborate, how we build trust and transparency within an organization. And that came up also very strongly as part of that assessment that we've made. And so that for me was our inflection point. And this is really when we took the leap to make this an integral approach, right? So we looked again at our different cogs, at the different parts of the organization. And we really use this to install a shared purpose across. We realize that there's decisions that need to be made on different time horizons, granularity, and it's about being clear on what decision we make on what level and within what group, right? That's extremely important. And that is essentially also how we differentiate S&OP and S&OE. So we started already to make some changes, right? And as a matter of survival, we implemented very fast an agile S&OP process, which is essentially S&OE, which we meet every week to review, to adapt the course of action, just to make sure that we do this in sync also with what we perceive in terms of market response. We realize it's also about enabling concurrent planning. So we have different parts of the organization that need to run their own processes, but we also need a clear anchoring point in our calendar and routines where we need and can bring this together. And at the very core of it, the idea is that planning is no longer an event. It's built in what we do. It's the way we think about, and it's something that rolls over time, right? And so we're really trying to move away from a very static process. And when you have that, when you realize that you're clear what time horizon you want to tackle, what level of detail you want to have these conversations on, then this is when, and also bring the customer perspective, this is when you can really set things into motion, right? You bring finance and your S&OP process together. That's essentially when you can now rebrand this or make the leap towards IBP. And that's how really things are starting to set into motion, right? And this is when we want to also access to a brand new level and talk about IBP. Now, moving on to shifting gears and really looking into our evolution towards IBP, I think it's important that maybe we spend a bit of time as to how we think about this. And that's a very, right or wrong, a very Henkelized definition. But what you see here is the way we talk about it internally, is the way we address and convince our organization that this is the stage that we're at, that this is the step that we need to take. So integrated business planning for us is a business process, is not a supply chain process, right? It's all about decision making. At the moment, a lot of effort is put into just making things surface, just bringing more information and take a joint look at that. But do we really drive decision out of this? Do we really look into scenarios? No, we don't quite yet, right? And that's something that we set ourselves as an ambition. We want to replace the current S&OP process, right? That's something that is important to tell to people. So we want to leverage a lot of what is done today, but if there's a need to stop stuff, then we should, because we should not add work. We should really create a fusion of all these different activities and bring this and sync this better all together. IBP is really about not about optimizing the bottom line, but it's also, and this is something that we position very strongly, it's a strong growth driver. And of that, we are convinced, and I'll come back to this in a minute. And that's something that at first sounded a bit counterintuitive, right? Because to a certain extent, the executive team was saying, hang on a second, supply chain is talking about driving growth. And supply chain is bringing and putting on the table, a new process to do that. So that took some time to sink in. And one of the steps that we also had to make was to make our CFO for the BU the sponsor of our IBP program, right? Otherwise, there was always this perception that we were struggling with to say, how do we elevate this beyond a pure supply chain scope? So that was very important to Mark. It's clear to us that we will need to rethink our process, that we will have to change the way we work. And that will also demand a certain investment in terms of our system landscape, right? Because there's certain stuff that we do today that we can do today, right? I talked about before gap closing or scenario modeling. I mean, doing this in Excel, I think is the best way to to have your IBP falling flat on its face. It just simply doesn't fly, right? And that's something that we're also looking into. But to us, what is really crucial is that all business functions are involved in that, and they take ownership in one of the steps that you see here as part of the IBP process. Now, let's spend a moment on the notion of creating value, of generating growth through IBP. So that picture that I share with you is also one that we shared with our laundry executive committee, right? It was important to position this very prominently at the beginning, so that we need to signal that we intend to drive both top line and bottom line growth, right? That is really crucial. And building a compelling business case to simulate this and also to take this as a baseline when you start the journey and measuring this along the way is crucial, right? Because it takes management attention. It takes senior executive involvement, not just sponsorship, but really drive and ownership to get this up and running. And so showing value delivered is extremely important as part of that, right? So and that's something that we position once again early on in the journey. Now I spend a lot of time on the why, and let me spend some time on the what also and on the how. So you can see that IBP, we really position this as an umbrella project that will drive change on 3 levels. The first one is really we enter this, and we always make a case of doing so by saying it's a process topic, it's an org topic, right? So the design aspect is very important, right? So in terms of rethinking the way we do things, rethinking how we make decisions and how that flows throughout the company is extremely important. And that will have an impact into how we shape our operating model and our organization design. The second piece is that, again, we're not going to do this on the basis of the current capabilities, system capabilities that we have today, right? We need to equip people to operationalize on the new process that we design and enable our team to drive things also on a different level. And this is why you see on the right-hand side, the next generation planning tool. That's something that we want to bring to life also as part of this transformation. And finally, I mean, ultimately what you want is to install new ways of working, right? And I think if 1 and 2 are there, that it's not the natural result because it takes still a lot of heavy lifting to do that. And the change aspect should not be overseen, overlooked. But it really is redefining the way we work, the way we collaborate, the way we also create brutal transparency, right, in the organization so that we make gaps clear so that we can address them. And so that what's in it for me is important, and also building a change narrative around this becomes crucial. Now, up until now, and this may surprise you, the story that I told you is not mine. And the reason why I say this is that when I joined the business unit in May to lead the program, there was already a team in place doing a fantastic job at activating the organization. And in fact, all the preconditions were already laid out. And I have to say, having worked in strategy for years, I know how painful it can be to put together a cross-functional team. And that may make some of you smile, but to have really FTE share discussion, how do you borrow arms and legs, hopefully brains also in the process through different parts of the organization to bring your initiatives to life is something that I experienced. And here I came. And I didn't need to have any of these discussions, right? Because there was a team that was activated. There was a consultancy already selected. So I literally had to onboard these guys, but that's about it. We had a very comprehensive project governance in place. I mean, 50, 60 people plus of our executive and really high management layers were engaged in that. We had 6 pilot countries lined up and onboarded with clear roles and responsibilities. And also an implementation plan defined. So we knew our roadmap. We knew what we had to do. And now some of you are asking me, why do you speak in past tense? What happened? Well, 1 year of preparation, all preconditions in place, everything laid out as of May, but we did not get started so far, right? And the question is, why? And I think that probably also will entail quite a few valid learnings to all of you, including myself, going through that. And so let me talk about this more in future looking now, and looking at this as far as our way forward is concerned. So what we realize, and you see that big red button on the right-hand side, we had to press that reset button. We had to rethink completely our IBP approach. And that came to me as a realization as I was onboarded in the BU, as I was talking to many people in the organization just to get a feel for what's happening here, what are people at, and talking to these people, I realize, okay, I mean, there's the highest degree of respect towards IBP. People really get the transformative nature of that, and that it's far-reaching, and that will redefine the way we work and collaborate. But many stakeholders have expressed the need to better understand and experience what that means in tangible terms. So it's as if people had intellectualized what IBP means, but did not yet feel it. And I think if you go through that extent of a transformation, you need to be able to marry those two aspects, right? We realized that we have a comprehensive program, but it was complex in terms of governance, having various countries involved, and that demands a lot of resources and management attention. Once again, if you think just of a steerco, for instance. And the third point is that, of course, I've mentioned before, we wanted to, and we still do, want to engage with the consultancy, and also that will drive significant platform invest. So just the invest to get into it, to get started, was quite daunting, right? And so we rethought our approach. We decided to lower the initial hurdle rate to start with IBP, to make this more tangible, right? To really be able to put our finger on the pulse and take it and work very closely with the country. We also understood that there's a need to cover a short-term business imperative. I've mentioned in what the current business context that we're in. But we said, let us work on shaping the mid to long term, on making structural improvements. So we had to really recalibrate that whole narrative around it. And so what is our way forward? So what we want to do is really to move away from a high stake entry point to something that is more limited in terms of risk and investment. From 6 pilot countries, we're going to work with a single market to begin with, right? And we're very cautious as to how we select that market, because we want to be intimate in the way they run their business, in their leadership team, so that we can really draw every piece of learning out of this. The third aspect is we really enter this as a process design and change management program. And now what we said is, hang on, we need to bring that technology aspect from the very beginning so that we can operationalize, we can enable, I mean, there's so much needed scenario planning. We need to enable this at the beginning, because we think this is what is going to deliver true business value. So our proposal is really to create our own Henkel IBP success story. So no longer go to an executive meeting to say we need to do that because peers are doing this or because other successful companies are doing this, but we need to do this because it works, right? And this is what we now set ourselves to do. And we will run a POC, a proof of concept, with a single market. And this is what we are going to start the new year's with. So with that, I mean, the rest is pretty much history in the making. But I hope at that stage is already useful food for thought for you to reflect on. And probably some of the learnings that we've made will make you smile, because you're going through this probably as you speak in your own respective company. And let me leave you with 3 key takeaways that at least I remind myself of every day. So number 1, don't compromise. Position IBP as a cross-functional business process that will drive growth. Of course, we could decide to start smaller, to say, hey, let's just run this as a supply chain initiative. But don't concede on that. That's important, because that's the true nature of the transformation to operate. Number 2, be creative in finding a way in, right? And it's important because it's a business process. It has to be embedded into a business context. We need to understand, acknowledge this, and offer a way forward that is in sync with that. And the third one, that sounds very simple, but for an entire team to recalibrate and to feel good about this, think big, start small, scale fast. That's what we keep repeating ourselves as a mantra, or as our new mantra, but that's very effective also on getting people energized again, excited again, and quite frankly, I can't wait to get started. So with that, I'm looking forward to your questions and to engage in what I hope it is a lively discussion. Many thanks.
Thanks. All right. I have some questions, Ariane. I was wondering, you have a lot of experience in the adhesive division within Henkel. Can you compare the adhesive division and its S&OP process or IBP, what you are experiencing now, and what can you learn from adhesives? Totally different market, but what are your experience in that area?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at adhesive versus laundry, you have at the core two very distinct business model, right? So I explained laundry is very much about the local P&L, the GM, the dynamic of the leadership team around this GM. Adhesive is the opposite. So adhesive has migrated years back now from a local to regional and now to a global business. So the way we think about this is there's a lot more of top down as far as this is concerned. In the way we drive strategy, you feel the markets are a lot flatter. So in terms of the way we don't think of people where they are based. So I think the country dimension comes more from where people, what people call home, as opposed to where we drive business. So we follow our customer footprint in adhesive technologies to a large extent. What does that bring? I mean, the truth lies in between. And I think as an S&OP/IBP process, what you need to enable is this notion of slicing and dicing data, making decision on the right level, aggregate and disaggregate. That I've seen in adhesive technologies. I mean, in that part of the organization, you have 800 industry verticals to cover 40 technologies. So you do need to segment your business. You do need to think on different lens that you apply. And that to me is valid in every part of an organization. And you need to enable this if you want to enable a decision-making process, right? So I think the way we think about IBP or S&OP at Henkel, it's crucial that we have that ability to aggregate, disaggregate, and make decisions on those different levels.
Right, thanks. Another question, you mentioned that your next IBP approach is considering the proof of concept, kind of minimal viable product. Sounds like a startup approach. You see a lot of new startup vendors in the S&OP and IBP field popping up, from the smaller startup to the scale-up ones. Is it also something that you are more looking in that area? Because you see, startups, you can easily even implement within weeks even. So is it also something you consider to do a short test drive in the software vendor environment?
So absolutely. I mean, the way you talked in your introduction, Martijn, in the way we select software vendors or applications, right? And that is dramatically changing. And this is something that we also look into a completely different way versus what was the case 2 years ago. So we want to invite these vendors. We want to give them Henkel set of data so that they can show us in their environment what the system can do and that we can experience also ourselves, right? That is really at the core of the decision-making process. And it's not only to select a system for what features or capabilities it can bring, but it's also to select a vendor or multiple vendors, right? Because I think most likely we will end up with, an ecosystem built out of different vendors' applications. So we need to choose people that we feel good about working with, right? Because it's not something that we can, of course, if you think in the spirit of use cases, agile, you want to go about making these steps, I don't know, in time buckets of 6 months or so, right? So you want to unleash value relatively quickly. But that's something that will take time to operate, right, on a global scale.
Another question from the audience online. How do you motivate people for the reset of this IBP journey? How do you convince them this is not a repetition of what they saw in past years?
Yeah, it's very important in the sense that you need to re-energize people. And how do we convince this? So first of all, I mean, it sounds very simple, but we were asking ourselves, we sent a signal to the organization that we put this on hold because we had to rethink our approach, right? So anyway, in the summer, we said to people, stay tuned, it will start in Q1 2022. And that is still the case. And now what we asked ourselves was to say, do we just say nothing and get started in the background to then create a product that we will be able to showcase to the organization? And the way we currently think about it is it's important to message that we will get started. it's important to say who we're going to do this with. So in terms of pilot market, so that we signal that we get started. But that's about it, right? I mean, because what we want afterwards is to focus on working, not on governing a whole project or program team with multiple executive team members. So we want to allow room to co-create, to work, and to develop that product and to build that change narrative. And then at the term of this, then we will go to the organization, and it will be different, because the difference is that we will have a Henkelized product, right? We will have something that we built of our own. And that to me is a lot more convincing than any simulation game that you can go that are also valid entry point, or even company peers exchange, right? And that's the way we decided to go about it.
A final question. How do you select the first country to start with? Do you create a contest out of it that people have to apply for it to be the first, to create enthusiasm, or is it something that you consider? So how do you select the first country to start with?
In a good fashion, in terms of setting up criteria. So at the moment, the way we've approached this is that we have a set of criteria. We look at this, and it's quite comprehensive as a list. We started with a long list, which is essentially every market we have in the world. And then we started to proceed by elimination, right or wrong. That's a little bit the way we went about this. And now we have essentially 4 countries on the table. And now we'll take the idea of the contest, because I think what we need to also test, and what is crucial, is what is the degree of engagement of that team and the desire for them to do this with us, because they will have to go out there and advocate for what we build together, right? So we need to make sure that people are on board, be it the leadership, be it the entire local team, because quite frankly, otherwise, it's not going to make a very convincing case, right? So I'll definitely take also that idea to be able to combine it with our current shortlist.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I guess that Johan Smits from his Heineken days can help you to tell about deployment worldwide, because he had a great schedule of how to engage all the countries around the world. Heineken is brewing their beer, so that might be of help if you have the next time to be here on site. So Ariane, thank you for your honest presentation. And yeah, the world is in kind of reset, and it's interesting to see that Henkel has also kind of reset in the IBP process, but based on a sound foundation. So for this, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your insights, and hope to see you next time live in person. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, here in the audience, we can grab a coffee. So we will be back at 12, and then we will start some parallel sessions. One here in the room, so be here, and you'll have a session by an innovative vendor. And also in parallel, we do it online. So be here in the room at 12 for the next session, inspiring a vendor pitch. And grab a coffee, mingle, and go by the booths of our sponsors. But we also have time for that during lunch. We have an hour for that later on. But for now, grab a coffee and some tea, and I'll see you back at 12 o'clock. And online, I will be back in the lounge, so you can meet me there. Test AirMeet if you are online. Go to the lounge. Go to the booth. You can do speed dating. You can actually connect to all the people online, texting messages and so forth and so on. So I will be in the lounge if you want to talk to me. If not, you can check your email, grab a cup of coffee, and hope to see you back at 12. Thank you.